It is October 7th, 1777. The air in the dense wilderness of upstate New York is choking with the sulfurous stench of black powder. The British Empire is on the verge of crushing the American rebellion once and for all. General Simon Fraser, the brilliant and fearless British commander, rides a magnificent gray horse through the chaos, flawlessly directing a devastating counterattack. Fraser is the absolute linchpin of the British line. His men are disciplined, heavily armed, and fighting with the overwhelming might of the world's greatest superpower behind them. As long as Fraser is on that horse, the Americans are losing. But high above the battlefield, hidden in the thick canopy of an ancient oak tree, a man is watching him. This man is not a gentleman. He's not a classically trained soldier. He is an illiterate, backcountry Irish immigrant frontiersman named Timothy Murphy. In his hands is a weapon the British barely understand, a custom-built, double-barreled Pennsylvania long rifle. He pulls the hammer back. He steadies his breathing. He aims at the gold epaulets on Fraser's uniform. A single crack rings out over the roar of the cannons. To understand how one bullet altered the trajectory of human history, you have to look at the terrifying British invasion force tearing through New York. General John Burgoyne's strategy relied entirely on European rules of war. Armies marched in massive rectangles. Men fired smoothbore muskets in synchronized volleys. And gentlemen officers on horseback dictated the slaughter from above. But George Washington knew he couldn't beat the British Empire in a gentleman's war. He needed a disruptor. So he deployed Colonel Daniel Morgan and 500 hardened Appalachian frontiersmen. They didn't stand in brightly colored lines. They vanished into the dark woods. And they carried Pennsylvania long rifles, weapons that spun a lead ball with terrifying gyroscopic precision. At 300 yards, a standard British musket couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. It was effectively a smoothbore shotgun. But in the hands of a lifelong hunter like Timothy Murphy, the long rifle was a hyper-accurate sniper system. Murphy looked through a weapon the British considered scientifically impossible, and he operated by rules the British considered barbaric. In the civilized warfare of Europe, intentionally shooting an aristocratic officer was considered outright murder. But to Murphy, an immigrant who had spent his entire life surviving the brutal frontier, a British general in a bright red coat wasn't a gentleman. He was the brain of the enemy war machine, and the brain was the highest value target on the board.
The violent collision of these two mentalities reaches its terrifying climax at the Battle of Bemis Heights. The American breastworks are actively buckling. The British right flank, anchored by elite light infantry and ruthless German mercenaries, is preparing to deliver the death blow. The entire Continental Army is seconds away from a catastrophic collapse. At the center of this impending slaughter is General Simon Fraser. Riding his towering gray warhorse, Fraser is a force of nature. He is single-handedly holding the British line together, screaming orders, completely immune to the chaos around him. Wherever Fraser rides, the British line instantly stiffens, locking their bayonets and preparing for the final bloody charge. Watching the American defenses crumble from the mud below is General Benedict Arnold. Before his infamous treason, Arnold was the Continental Army's most aggressive attack dog. Arnold realizes instantly that the British infantry aren't fighting for the king at this moment. They are fighting purely on Simon Fraser's momentum. If Fraser drops his sword and orders that bayonet charge, the American army dies. Burgoyne marches into Albany. The revolution is severed in half and suffocated in its crib. Arnold frantically spurs his horse through the chaotic gunsmoke, searching desperately for Daniel Morgan. When he finds him, Arnold points a blood-stained, trembling finger directly at the British lines. "That man on the gray horse is a host in himself!" Arnold screams over the deafening roar of the artillery. "He must be disposed of! Direct the fire of some of your best men upon him!" Morgan doesn't hesitate. He understands the grim, brutal necessity of the order. He immediately summons his most lethal marksman, Timothy Murphy. The target is roughly 300 yards away. Across a valley choked with dense, swirling black powder smoke, chaotic infantry clashes, and erratic autumn winds,
Murphy nods silently to Morgan. He sprints toward a massive ancient oak tree that towers over the right flank of the American breastworks, aggressively scaling the thick bark to find a vantage point. From his elevated sniper's nest, Murphy has a panoramic, horrifying view of the collapsing American line. The Continental soldiers below are exhausted, bleeding, and terrified, actively falling back. Across the trampled grass, Fraser is raising his sword, rallying the elite 24th Regiment of Foot for the final push. Time has completely run out. Murphy locks the heavy iron barrel of his rifle against a thick branch to eliminate any tremor. He doesn't think about the mechanics of the shot. He simply watches Fraser's gray horse pacing aggressively behind the rigid British lines. He slows his heart rate. He ignores the deafening screams of the dying. He breathes out and he pulls the trigger. The sharp crack of the rifle is instantly swallowed by the roar of the battle. 300 yards away, the heavy lead ball slices cleanly through the air and violently severs the leather crupper of Fraser's saddle, passing mere inches behind the general's spine. It is a phenomenally close miss. That near miss sends an immediate shockwave of panic through the British command staff. They instantly recognize the terrifying, distinct crack of an American long rifle. They realize this is not random, inaccurate volley fire from the infantry below. Someone is actively hunting the commanding general with a sniper rifle. An aide-de-camp frantically spurs his horse to Fraser's side. He begs the general to immediately fall back, screaming that a rebel sniper has him perfectly zeroed in. But Fraser is bound by the rigid, aristocratic honor of the British Empire. Retreating from an unseen, cowardly peasant hiding in a tree is fundamentally unthinkable to a British aristocrat. Fraser aggressively refuses. He coldly declares his duty is to remain at the absolute front of his men, regardless of the personal danger. It is a fatal collision of British hubris and American pragmatism. Fraser chooses honor. Up in the tree, Murphy simply rotates the double barrels of his rifle, locking the second load into place. The American lines are actively splintering now. Arnold is desperately trying to plug the gaps, but the sheer weight of the British infantry is too much. The bayonets are lowering. Murphy aligns his iron sights for the second shot, tracking the erratic movements of the frantic gray horse through the thick clouds of battlefield smoke. He fires. The second ball tears across the valley and slams violently into the thick mane of Fraser's gray horse. The massive animal rears up in pure panic, thrashing wildly, nearly throwing its rider. The British line holds its collective breath in terror, but Fraser miraculously maintains his grip on the reins and keeps his seat. He survived a second impossible shot. The British soldiers roar in absolute defiance. Their commander is invincible. Fraser raises his sword even higher, projecting total fearlessness to his men. The momentum violently swings back to the Empire. The 24th Regiment steps forward. Up in the oak tree, Murphy is reloading. This is where most men break. The sheer psychological pressure of painstakingly pouring powder and ramming a lead ball down a barrel while watching your own army collapse below you is paralyzing. But Murphy's hands do not shake. He operates with terrifying mechanical coldness. He doesn't look at the thousands of redcoats preparing to charge. He only looks at the bright red coat and the gold epaulets of the man on the gray horse. Fraser's officers are literally screaming at him to move. They know the third shot is coming. But Fraser stubbornly holds his ground. He is actively daring the sniper to try again. Murphy brings the heavy wooden stock to his shoulder for the final time. The wind suddenly shifts, blowing a thick curtain of gray gun smoke across the valley, completely obscuring the British lines. Murphy doesn't panic. He simply waits. The smoke parts for just a fraction of a second. The gray horse is perfectly framed in the gap. Murphy aligns the sights with the center of Fraser's chest, taking one final steadying breath. He gently squeezes the trigger. The third ball rips through the air. It doesn't hit the horse. It strikes General Simon Fraser squarely in the stomach with the devastating blunt force trauma of a sledgehammer. The impact is utterly catastrophic. Fraser violently drops his sword. He doubles over in the saddle, his face contorting into an expression of absolute agony and shock. The invincible commander slumps forward,
desperately clinging to his horse's bloody mane for a few agonizing seconds before losing his grip, sliding off, and collapsing onto the trampled grass. The psychological effect is instantaneous and terrifying. The British 24th Regiment, mere seconds away from launching their victorious bayonet charge, stops dead in their tracks. The deafening roar of the British advance is immediately replaced by stunned, horrifying silence.
They watch in absolute disbelief as their beloved, invincible commander is hurriedly carried off the field, bleeding profusely. In that exact fraction of a second, the brain of the British war machine is violently severed from its body. The rigid discipline that held the British line together instantly evaporates into thin air. The violent momentum dies in their throats. Without Fraser's terrifying, commanding presence to force them forward, the British infantry suddenly realize they are standing in an open field, completely exposed to the American guns. Benedict Arnold sees the hesitation. He sees the exact moment the British nerve shatters completely. With a feral scream, Arnold orders a massive, overwhelming American counterattack. The Continental Army, realizing they have just been granted a miracle, surges forward like a tidal wave. They slam into the paralyzed British lines. The British right flank instantly shatters. Without Fraser, there is no one left to rally them. The battle is completely over. The dominoes begin to fall with terrifying, unstoppable speed. Because Fraser died, the British attack collapsed. Because the attack collapsed, General Burgoyne's entire invasion force was pushed off the high ground and forced into a desperate, chaotic retreat through freezing, torrential rain. 10 days later, completely surrounded, starving to death, and utterly broken, Burgoyne does the unthinkable. He surrenders his entire army of nearly 6,000 men to the Americans. It is the very first time in human history that a British army has ever surrendered on the battlefield. But the shockwave doesn't stop in the forests of New York. A fast ship carries the news of Burgoyne's surrender across the Atlantic Ocean, directly into the opulent halls of Versailles. King Louis XVI of France reads the dispatch in stunned silence. The absolute impossible has just happened. The Americans can actually win. Based entirely on the outcome of this single battle, France officially signs a treaty of alliance with the United States. They pour millions in gold, massive stockpiles of gunpowder, and the absolute might of the French Navy directly into the American cause. The American rebellion is saved. What was a localized, easily containable colonial uprising instantly detonates into a massive global world war. The British Empire is suddenly forced to fight the French Navy in the Caribbean, in the English Channel, and in India. They can no longer focus all their resources on crushing George Washington. The British military is stretched completely to its breaking point. They lose America, and all of it. Every single falling domino of the American Revolution traces back to one terrifying moment. An illiterate frontiersman sitting in the branches of an oak tree, calculating the wind, holding his breath, and firing one fatal shot.